my mind. Looks like we're in the click, click, click. Still living the life, cooler in the sunshine. Somebody hand me a beer, beer, beer.
Welcome to today's video. My name is Mark, and this is a very special occasion for me today. My younger son, Brandon's younger brother, Jesse, has been spending a few days with us here at our home, and we are going to do a talk today about boomers and Zoomers. Exactly. Jesse's going to be today, he's going to be representing that demographic, and we're going to just cover some of the topics that we feel, or what we know from the studies we've looked at, are relevant to this age group and some of the concerns that you have from a money perspective, not necessarily investing directly, but just more from a money management perspective. There's an experience study that we looked at in preparation for this video, and some of the statistics that come out of this are really quite alarming, I would say. A couple of things. First of all, 49% of your demographic feel that it's important and you're interested in financial investing, in financial management. However, 64% of your demo has never even taken a look at how to manage your finances. There's quite a discrepancy in there. The study shows, I'm going to run through just a few of the statistics here. It shows that 76% of Zoomers say that high school should have offered classes on managing finances. There's a gap in there. 51% are afraid that money issues will prevent them from doing what they want to do in life. 43% are afraid they won't have enough money to be happy. That's a big one. 37% feel compelled to compete financially with peers, as the older as the boomers would say, keeping up with the Joneses. 35% self-reported poor spending habits, and 30% believe that the system is set up for them to fail financially. And when we look through those stats, and to me it's dismaying and alarming that so many of the younger demographic are struggling with this concept of finances. So we're going to talk today. We've identified a few of the most relevant topics, we would say, and then Jesse, as we go through this, we'll just sort of freewheel it, and you can just come up with anything that comes to your mind, keeping sort of from the perspective of, as you're sitting and chatting with your peers, what are the discussions that you have. Fear number one that we're going to start with: there's a high percentage of people that feel that money problems will hold you back. And of note, the average debt, now this is a US study, but it probably is fairly relevant here in Canada. The average debt of Zoomers today is about $14,700. And so it's easy to see when there's a lack of education and struggling with debt, and that's either a combination typically of student debt or of credit card debt. There's a lack of confidence that things are going to work out in the future. So I'm just curious, when you're chatting with your friends, is this a topic that comes up, or what are your thoughts on this?
Interesting. The first question that I have is this average debt of $14,700. Where does that come from? Exclusively credit cards and student loans?
Predominantly. The study, if you go to the details, predominantly student loans and credit card debt.
Wow. Yeah. And that averages out over all of the people in our age range.
Correct. There's an average. Many have a lot higher, obviously, and some have zero, right? Mm-hmm. So somewhere in that range. And so when you look at the demographic as a group, I see that as a concern. And, I think back to the early 80s when, I was more your age, and I remember a friend of mine who had gotten into debt problem. And back in the day, I remember the number, he was in debt $10,000. Now, factored in inflation, that's even more than $15,000 today. But I remember the stress that he was going through when he sort of decided to sort of fight that issue. So yeah, when you talk amongst your friends, don't mention any names, of course, but does this come up as a problem?
Mm-hmm, it does, and it's staggering to see the number, because growing up with you and living with the lessons that you taught us at a very young age, we haven't personally experienced significant debt in our lives. Mm-hmm. However, in a big friend group that we have, and just meeting people and talking about this kind of stuff, now that we're kind of getting to that age, I'm realizing that there are a lot of people who, through student loans and I guess just like poor spending habits, are dealing with this kind of debt, which, I guess from my perspective, I can't say that I'm in this like Gen Z millennial category where I'm like, I resonate with this, because we've had you to kind of instill this in us. But yeah, it is a problem that in my personal life, through people I know and just experience, it's something that is to be considered and isn't, it's not just, if you're somebody who doesn't personally deal with debt, that doesn't mean that it's not a real thing, right?
Yeah, good point. And it's more of a societal issue, right, than each individual. Obviously, there's if we look at credit card and student loan debt, I mean, I differentiate between those two. It's still debt, but there's good debt and bad debt. And if you're a 25-year-old who maybe has purchased a condo or an apartment, most people would consider a mortgage to be good debt. There's an asset that you're having there. It's not debt that you've gone on vacations 5 times, and so you've got your credit cards maxed out. So it is important, I think, to differentiate between those two types of debt. I would also say a key here, and how do you fix this? I believe that people today have sort of I guess we've always lived beyond our means, and so the availability of credit makes it so easy to just go out and buy stuff, and then we'll deal with it later, and then later comes. And I think of the some of the there's a famous furniture store I'm thinking of that pay in 2023 or buy it today. And so the theory kind of is, if you don't have the money today, you feel, well, I'll buy this and I'll get a better job, or I'll make more money, or I'll save more money, I'll pay it off in 2 years. I mean, they don't offer those for nothing. The reality is that a lot of people don't. And then, of course, there's fees and what have you come on top of that. So, that's it is interesting to know in your discussions, Jess, with your peers, that this is something that is a topic. And I hope that we're able to recognize it and, take steps to avoid it by...
I wonder what that is, though, because, I mean, personally, I've never had credit card debt that I couldn't pay off.
Right.
It was always and sometimes it got pretty heavy. If my new set of golf clubs,
Yeah.
it's $850 or a couple $1,000s for a credit card. But it's when I used my credit card to purchase that, I had that money in my bank account.
Right.
And in a lot of cases, I guess, that's, people get caught up in the offers of, or the allure of, not paying for something right now because, you don't need to worry about it, right?
Well, I think that's the case. Well, clearly it is, because most people, if you had money in your bank account and you had a credit card bill that comes due at the end of the month, you would pay it off. So clearly, and this is where you're extending beyond what you are capable of, and that kind of almost ties into the next fear number 2 that we addressed here, which is the pressure to compete with peers. And I think a lot of it is that, and I think Brandon did a video probably a couple of years ago now, where in the video he talked about everybody was going on vacation, and he didn't have a ton of extra money sitting around. And I don't think he took on debt to go on vacation, but I think he cashed in some money, is it TFSA or RRSP or something, to go on holidays. So in your discussions with your peers, Jesse, how much of this is an issue? Do you feel that the group, there is that peer pressure to live up to a certain status, maybe, whether it's a new car, clothing, that type of thing? What is your experience there?
Well, I think it depends on the individual.
Okay.
But an example that I like to think of is, the pressures of moving out, especially here in Vancouver, right? It's a lot of money that you're going to be spending every month, and obviously there's positives and negatives that you can argue. But the point is, there have been a lot of people who have moved out because their peers have been moving out.
Right.
And that aren't necessarily in a situation that would that would be a good idea financially, but because of the pressure and the
expectation almost,
and of course, as somebody who's been moved out since I was 20, there's a lot of good things I have
there's
to say
an allure
about
to doing it, right?
Exactly, right? And my friends and peers are in similar situations and similar types of people, so it's something that is definitely alluring. However, I think it is important. I guess the reason behind kind of talking about this subject, and I guess the idea behind the channel, is that you have to be able to decide whether any decision you make financially is suitable for your situation. Right?
Yeah.
So that's something that I think is definitely very prevalent in my
circle, in your orbit.
Yeah.
Well, one of the findings in this study was, when people do compete with their peers, it's costly. But then even when you, because you're always trying to live up to the highest standard, right? And then when people are unable to, they become, the study says, discouraged and demoralized, because they're not keeping up, and then they disengage. And not from their friends, but they disengage from this concept of, gee, how much should I be spending? Or is this a problem that I'm building up here? And so there's the realization that, wow, this isn't a good thing, but you know what? You throw your hands up and you just go, I'm not moving back home, or I'm just going to do what I have to do to make it work. So I would say to fix that problem, one of the keys would be, and this is hard to do, especially for a younger person, but know what your priorities are. And it's age-old, and keeping up with the Joneses. Every generation has gone through that, but it's good to remind us of all ages the fact that your neighbor got a new toy doesn't mean you have to get a new toy, or the fact, so all these things we just talked about. What are your have you seen that with your groups?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, how that would be addressed, I think would be a good overarching way to describe that would be to build those habits early on in your childhood, right?
Yeah.
Like the same way that you did for us, right?
Right.
It's, start investing, start saving, understand these concepts. But as a former investment advisor and current dad, what advice would you give to somebody who, let's say, somebody that I know who didn't have that advice given to them by their parents, right, or who are now in their adult years and having to deal with all this? What in that situation would you suggest?
Well, you're amazing, Jesse, because fear number 3, the financial insecurity, a cause of that that's been identified is Gen Z's failure to start even savings. And it's tough, and especially in the environment that we live in where the cost of living is very high. So there's different pockets in the country, so everybody's not in the same circumstance. But even though we live in an area with high housing costs, it doesn't mean that going to McDonald's is more expensive, or it doesn't mean that buying food at a grocery. So I kind of understand the cost of living argument, but at the same time, a lot of what we do in our life, there's not that direct apples to apples comparison. So to your point, I wish that the schools instilled the importance of that basic savings plan and starting, even if it's, I would say $25 a month, if you have limited cash flow, just putting the money away. I know there's a lot of your peers who probably still live at home, and I know a lot of your friends, and I know some of the people. There's a difference between some who are living at home, let's say rent-free, for example, who are taking all the money they would otherwise be paying and putting it away, investing it, putting it into their TFSA, for example. There's quite a bit of that. And then, of course, there's the flip side where people have that cash flow, and it's exciting when you get your first job, when you start working, and you've got the cash flow just to go out and do all these things. So understanding that the old pay yourself first rule, where you take a percentage of that, and going right back, if some of you have seen the video that the boys and I did on some of the lessons I taught them when they were younger, part of that training, I would call it, was that every time you buy something, you have to put a percentage of the money away in long-term savings. And I think that it's not so much the $25 today, but it's instilling that habit. And I know that you in your head that's ingrained. As a representative of the Zoomer generation, are you seeing that? Is this something that you talk about with your friends?
No. It's when I do see it, it's a rarity. And because I know what's happening, I recognize it, and there's a few friends that it's okay, this guy's got it figured out. Right. But I would say in most cases, it's the understanding that it's not the $25 today, it's the $25 every month forever. Right. That's going to make the difference. That's not that's a much more difficult concept to resonate with than $25 today, and also McDonald's that you're hungry for and that you're craving.
Yeah,
that's a lot easier to lean into. And even for me, so
yeah, I understand that, and there's this, there's the concept of it's easier for an older person to look back and see, well, the last 2 generations or the last 2 decades, this is what's happened. It's harder for a 24 or 25 or 30-year-old even to look ahead 2 generations or 2 decades and go, okay, if I do this today, it'll be a payoff. And it's one of the things I've always found kind of challenging about the industry that I worked in, is that you come in, you deposit your money, and you don't get anything. You don't walk home with something shiny. You can't go and eat something, or there's the payoff is always down the road. And so it's a mindset that we have to get into as a society. And so it doesn't surprise me that you're in your circle, you see some of those, or not necessarily bad habits, but not good habits, right? Doing that. Habits. Fear number 4 that we identified is just sort of the category of bad spending habits. And one of the things that, as a boomer, I'm aware it's ubiquitous with the younger generation is this concept of, I want to live for today. You don't know what tomorrow's going to bring, and why am I going to put a whole bunch of money in safe so when I'm an old person, I can't do these things. I'm going to do it today. And I fully agree with the concept of that balance, but I do worry about people who spend all of their money today to live those experiences, and then hopefully people get older and run into troubles down the road. I'm sure you've experienced that with your peer group.
Yeah, and I mean, maybe this isn't as thought out as it needs to be, but to me it seems like just kind of a lack of understanding.
Could be.
Right? It's or at least has a big part of it, right? Like if you understood, and I mean, if you're watching this type of video and you're into this kind of stuff, you're definitely on the right track and more likely to resonate with this kind of stuff. But if you understand why you're doing these things, like why you're not spending that $25 today, the value of it later down the road, if you truly understand that, you're significantly more likely to be able to do that. But I mean, as we touched on earlier, a lot of people go their entire adolescence and high school years without knowing that this is something that is even a thing, right? And if you're not aware of it, if you're not made aware of it, while if you're not shown that at a young age when it's other people's, like parents and teachers' responsibilities to kind of guide you, then you're not going to understand it, right? And yeah, like I said, it's way easier to just say, like, this what I understand is this $25 is going to get me a really nice meal out, and
hot pot or something,
and that's going to make me, and that's going to make me happy, right? That's very easy to understand. So I think it all just comes down to awareness and understanding to influence decision making.
Well, I mean, well said. And on this topic, the study shows that that the boomers or even the millennials rely on your peers to make spending decisions. And again, this is kind of like going back to the keeping up with the Joneses. Everybody sort of tends to follow the same habit. They're affixed to that, I would say. Similar to what we just talked about before, and point 2, I think, was just know yourself, know what your objectives are, and have some plans. They don't have to be complicated, but just simple. Even something as simple as, I want to put that money away, and I would say do whatever it takes. So if you're short for a month, well, then you stay home for a couple of meals, or you don't go for that extra round of golf, that type of thing. You just you resolve in yourself, but it's hard because I mean we're all social animals, right? And so we like to do things with other people, but sometimes that is that's what it takes. Jesse, I want to cycle back to sort of an overriding theme here, and this is the education system, and you hear it all the time that that the education system doesn't teach us these important concepts of money management, not necessarily investing even. Investing, certainly not, but even how to manage a checkbook or balance a checkbook, that type of thing. You went through school. Just your gut, your honest opinion of, I think you probably agree it is a problem. What should be done?
Oh man, that's a tough one. Okay, so this might be a hot take, but like going through everything that we've gone through with the Investing Academy, speaking with people and having the channel and people reach out, like what I'm learning is that, I mean, this is not something that you understand as a young person, but I mean, everybody throughout their entire lives are responsible for understanding this stuff. Even parents, even teachers, even people of authority. And I mean, what we're seeing is that there are a lot of people who don't understand it. And I think what happens is, what it seems like is it's almost like a, taboo, right? Like there's for some reasons this gap in education regarding finances. Like it seems like it's coming from a place of like, yeah, you shouldn't be discussing your finances anyways.
Private. It's all private.
It's all private stuff. And the hot take is that like I feel like the people that kind of are instilling that probably don't have a full understanding of their finances, because if they did, in cases like like you and Brandon and everything that we're doing with the channel, it's like, I mean, we understand the importance of it, and it's so much more valuable to say like, this is the stuff you need to understand. You don't have this figured out right now. That's okay. It's very important that you do, right? And it just seems like that narrative hasn't been pushed historically, and is
Well, and what kind of ticks me off is every single person has to deal with finances when they grow up. And so how that gap is in the school system, it blows my mind, where of all of the subject matter that we learn from kindergarten up to grade 12, there's so many things that we're exposed to, and yet there's we just brush the surface, if that, of these things that every day we deal with. Whether you go to the store and paying cash, well, you need to know how much your change should be, or concepts like the good habits. So yeah, I mean, I guess we could probably talk for an hour in another video about this gap in there. But yeah, I was just curious about what your take on it was, because you've more recently completed that process. I went through school many years ago, and so it's kind of a distant memory for me. But seeing you and Brandon go through school, I was dismayed at how this real world subject is so pushed to the side almost. So yeah, well, good, Jesse. I appreciate you coming here. Well, to visit in the first place, but to spend a little bit of time and do this video, because I wanted just to be specifically, as you know, a lot of our demographic is your age, and so hopefully this can resonate and give some of your peers some ideas. Now, before we sign off for today, I also want to just acknowledge, because you're here as well, as many of you know, certainly if you're a regular channel viewer, you know that a recent video that Brandon put out talked about the fact that he's going to be a dad in a few months. And, I'm just, we've had a lot of feedback, specifically because, a lot of the viewers, because I'm part of the channel, are, oh, you're going to be a grandpa, and, asking questions about how I feel about that. So I'll just say, it's hard. Well, for those of you who are grandparents, it's really hard to. I mean, I'm not yet, but it's emotional, and it's awesome news. And when Brandon and Vivian called to tell us they'd gotten back from the ultrasound, and first of all, Brandon FaceTimed me, and we were in the kitchen. And Brandon doesn't usually FaceTime; he usually calls, or we arrange a time to talk on Zoom or whatever. And so that's odd. So he FaceTimed me, and then Vivian was standing behind him in the video. And I went, okay, something is weird here. And I kind of figured this is what it might be, because they've been together for a long time. They're engaged, and I suspected at some point, they go this route. So as I was sort of putting two and two together, they showed the picture of the ultrasound, and it was good. I'm for those of you who care so much, and Brandon has received so many congratulations. Well, Brandon and Vivian have received so many well wishes and words of wisdom, and here's what you do, and be careful and get some sleep now, because you won't be able to then. I know, will be an uncle for the first time, and maybe share your thoughts on what your feelings are. and you live right beside Brandon, so you'll be able to see the little gaffer a lot.
Yeah, I've had a little bit more time to process. I don't know if you know this, but I was the first, other than Vivian, I guess, the first person to know that they were having a baby. So I've known for a while, and Brandon and I have grown very close over the years. But it's just something different, and I know that everybody who has become an uncle or had a kid says it, but it's just like when it all becomes like real like that, like it's like here's the ultrasound, like it's a baby, it's pretty crazy. I just I'm sad that I'm no longer going to be the youngest immediate Beavis.
That's right.
I require a lot of attention. And,
no more.
Imagine that it's all going to be going to the baby. So there's going to be a bit of a learning curve for cool Uncle Jesse.
I remember the day that I brought Brandon home from the hospital, and your world certainly does change. And I remember he's like 7 pounds, something like that, this big. And I remember him lying on the bed, and just the realization hits that this human being is now your responsibility. The doctors are done, and it is overwhelming, and I'm excited. I've always thought, whether it's you or Brandon who has a baby, it is a world-changing experience. And so, Brandon, I'm sure you're probably going to be watching this, and Vivian, and it's a lot of people say prepare for this big change, and it's an awesome change. And it's going to be hard. It's going to teach you a lot. You guys taught me so much, mostly about patience.
It's probably me.
I'll give you and Brandon, in the early days, you guys were equal. Later in life, you gave me more of the teaching me patience, but with that comes so many other things. So it's going to be good. And so, bottom line, you're going to be an uncle, a tito, for those Filipinos who are in our, and I guess I'll be a grandpa or a lolo in the Tagalog language, of which Brandon and Jesse are half, in case you're not aware. And we're looking forward. Just thanks again to everybody who sent those overwhelming messages of good luck and support for Brandon and Vivian. So that's pretty cool. So, Jesse, unless you have anything else Zoomer-like to say, we're going to wrap this up from a boomer to a Zoomer. Any last-minute words of wisdom?
Yeah, if you want to see more of me, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, drop a like, leave a comment down below saying, Uncle Jesse, we want to see more.
Uncle Jesse. And you can see more of Jesse. He's a YouTuber. He has his own channel called Jesse's Barbershop. And if you check that out, and especially if you're a guy who has hair, like Jesse has hair, he does all kinds of topics on what kind of shampoo to use, how to grow out your hair, how to cut your hair, and everything, every hair related, right? Yeah. So feel free to check that out as well. And on that note, the first link below this video is for our Investing Academy. And, just as we're talking here, Jesse, I'm thinking of all the things, this huge gap in education that's out there. That's one of our primary goals of the Investing Academy, is to fill that gap so you don't have to feel like I have done no training. And so what am I going to do for the rest of my life? If it's something that interests you and learning more about these topics, click on the link and have a look around there. We'd love for you to check that out. With that, we will wrap it out. I'm sad Jesse's going back to Vancouver.
Flight's in an hour.
In an hour and 10 minutes. So we better wrap this up. And it's from a fatherly thing. So we'll wrap it up. Thanks everybody for watching, and we will see you in the next video.